Lindsay. Well, it's lovely to have you all with us today. And thank you for introducing yourselves in the chat. I'm Catherine Wilton, for those of you who haven't been on any of the masterclasses before. So I'm one of the deputy directors in the Personalised Care Group in NHS England, and directing this Leadership for Personalised Care programme, which is very much a partnership and collective effort that involves thinking about different types of leadership for health and care and the voluntary sector and housing. This is about changing the system so that everybody it has the opportunity to get the best health outcomes possible for them through what we're driving forward in personalised care. If you were on the first couple of modules, you will have learned already about personalised care and some of the amazing co-productive leadership that we've kind of taught you about. And at the last masterclass, we heard from Professor Mary Albeen, who was talking about leading in complexity. So this is the second masterclass of our leading in or personalised care in complexity module, and we're actually delighted we're going to be joined today by Dr. Mark McKergow, who's going to talk about his amazing model of leadership, which he calls host leadership. So let's just introduce you to our team. So you've met many of us before. You're going to hear from Mark in a moment. We have lots of people in the background trying to make sure that it all goes smoothly for you. So we've got a wonderful Zoom hosts, tech support, backup hosts in case my internet goes down. You've already heard from Lindsay, Julie and Maggie, who are our chat monitors, so they'll be looking at what you're writing and bring it into the room, because we don't have enough space to hear from every single person individually, which is a shame, but Maggie, Julie and Lindsay will make sure that your voices are in the room. And everybody else here is a really valued member of the team and may be in one of your breakout rooms later. So breakout room facilitators are not there to kind of to tell you anything. They're just there to make sure that everything runs smoothly for you into that breakout room, and to give us a little bit of feedback maybe as well. Okay, so before we start with the masterclass proper, let's hear from you a little bit, that if you were in the last masterclass, one thing that you took away from the session with Mary, if you attended it or if you watched it. And if you didn't attend or watch it yet, you've got a treat in store for you, because it was really great, even if I do say so myself. And you can just tell us what you're learning from doing this program, or from some of the stuff that you've read already about this program. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes to put that in the chat, a couple of seconds rather, and then I'm just going to ask Lindsay to sum up a few things that people are saying about what they learned from that masterclass with Mary. Lindsay, if I can come to you.
Yeah, sure. So we've got give change a chance. The network starts with you. We've got the networking and co-production to tackle complexity, and also just thinking that people need to work outside their comfort zone. I think that's a really strong theme that's coming through at the moment. And this is a great one that's just come through from Dawn. Pressure is your friend.
Yeah, that came through, didn't it? And it's really difficult. It's counterintuitive for us, but that pressure actually tells us something about the system that we need to be aware of. Thank you, Lindsay. So the second question, and thank you for everybody obviously who commented there. The second question is what you're hoping for from today. So just tell us what you're hoping for. And then I'm going to ask Maggie to sum up what people are saying in the chat.
So thanks everyone. It's good to see your comments coming through. Oh, Kate, I love the online party, but vulnerable leadership, that's interesting. It may be that, Kevin, you got that from the last masterclass, which is probably what you did. But I love Vicky, yes, inspiration, and we certainly will get that from Mark. And how to be a host. I think it's really interesting, isn't it? Some of us already know some of these things, but sometimes when it's articulated, you can actually sort of frame it in your mind. And I love that from Angela, how to get people to start working with a change approach. Yeah, and that is really around that leadership bit and leading together, isn't it? That we try and sort of support in this approach. Lovely from Samir, that opportunity to learn, and we will all learn today, and I'm looking forward myself to doing that. And Wilbert, I love that about stepping forward and stepping back. Yes, and kind of knowing the moments around leadership, when to do that. And I'm sure Mark will cover that in his host piece.
I think we might have some
and
host
I really like
experts here.
Cynthia. I think we do, because I really like what we've put in here around the COVID thing as well. How maybe the context we're working in change our style of host leadership. That's really interesting. And how to sort of work around things that might be barriers and some of the resilience we might need. I know some people don't like that word resilience, but how do we as leaders kind of work around some of these challenges, noticing the context we're in? So, wow, Mark, I think you've got quite a challenge on your hands with it. No pressure, but it looks like we're really looking forward to it.
Loads of really good opportunities for exploring those things in groups as well, in relation to what you'll hear from Mark. So thank you very much for that. It sounds like you'll come in really prepared and eager to learn, which is fantastic. And we've got a quick poll for you. Remember, we did one of these last time. So Rosie's going to put that poll up next, I think. So the poll is, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is low, can you rate how comfortable you are working with uncertainty? Okay, so nearly all of you have voted. I'll just give you a couple more seconds. And if you can see that, Mark, you can see that actually there's quite a sort of there's quite a high level here of people's people feeling comfortable with uncertainty. I wonder if we'd asked you this a year ago, before the pandemic really kicked in, if you would have all felt the same. We've all been forced into this situation of very uncertain times, haven't we? Or at least the uncertainty that is always there being very, very prominent in everyone's minds. So this sounds like a group that's up for a challenge, is quite happy with something new, quite happy with trying out something new. And I think that bodes really, really well for all of you guys. Thank you for that. So I'm gonna hand over to Mark. Oh no, I need to do the ground rules first. Sorry, this is just, you've heard these before if you've been on one of our masterclasses, and it's really important that we've got a shared space that that we all, we're all agreeing to work in. As usual, any tech issues, just put a note in the chat, and Molly or Rosie will help you out. And we are using the chat for communication, mainly just because there's 172 of us in the room now, so we can't all hear your voices individually. So do use the chat, but we will have breakout space for you to have some proper conversations with each other. Remember that the breakout rooms is where most of your learning will happen. So it's your reflection on what you'll hear and what it means for you in the context of your own life and your own leadership. So stay for the whole session if you can. We know you'll get the full benefits if you protect this time. You can get online, involved in our online community. We've got a handle and hashtag seen on the header of each slide. And if you're okay with all, I haven't read out all of the rules, but if you're okay with all of those, can you just stick the words "I consent" in the chat? And that helps us just to know that we've got trust and confidentiality between us here today. Thank you for doing that. And whilst people are doing that, we can just move on to the next slide, which is an overview of where we've gone and where we're going. So this is the last module of the last masterclass of module 2, module 3 starting in February, with the first masterclass on the 25th of February. So hopefully you've got those dates in your diary. And you will have seen the online resources that accompany these modules. So on the next slide, just showing you little screenshots of those 2 course booklets. Okay. So I'm going to move straight on to introducing Mark now, without further ado. Dr. Mark McKergow is somebody that I've been following for quite a long time. Not stalking you, Mark, but I first became aware of the theory of host leadership about 8 years ago. And it really, really chimed with me. It really made me realise that possibly it's a style that I was doing anyway but didn't realise. So I think some of these, what we'll hear from you is a lot of these things are kind of like innate and come naturally, but in a way aren't necessarily always thought of as being leadership. So what I didn't realise that I was doing these things. But it really chimed with me, because if you want to make real change happen, it seemed to me you needed to be able to get more people feeling the passion, feeling the love, getting more people involved, and how you did that when you didn't have a position of power was a little bit of a mystery to me until I heard this model. So so it really chimed with me. So Mark, you're an innovator in leadership and organisational change. Those of you who are coaches on the call will have read Mark's work or been aware of Mark's work in solution-focused coaching as well, solution-focused practice. And you've been developing this paradigm of leading as host since 2003, so that's quite a while now. So it's great to see it gaining more traction elsewhere. I'm sure you'll tell us about your books. They're well worth the read. I can absolutely recommend those. And there's much more information about Mark's work on his website, hostleadership.com, which I'm sure that you will share as well. But thank you so much for being with us today. Very much looking forward to what you've got to say, and being part of our growing community. Over to you, Mark. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Catherine, and hello everybody. It's great to be with you. I'm in Edinburgh, Scotland this morning, and you can see Edinburgh behind me. This isn't exactly the view out of my window, but it's a grand city, as many of you will know. And I'm very excited to be here with you today to begin with to share the ideas around host leadership with you. And I think that host leadership is an idea that sits very well with this idea of working with complexity and uncertainty. And I was very interested to see in the pre-poll that we just did, there's a good range of comfort at working with uncertainty. And even those of you who are quite comfortable will find things today that will help you to tackle uncertain situations in a positive way. Because tackling uncertainty doesn't mean that you don't know what to do. And one of the wonderful things about the host metaphor and model is these are things you can do whatever the outcomes are going to be, but they're things that will help nudge things and bring things into a better perspective and bring people together in a better way, so that what emerges from your meetings and your projects and your work will be better. That's the thing. So you're tilting the odds in your favor all the time by doing this. So I hope you can see the beginning of the presentation now. There's two books there, Host, 6 New Roles of Engagement, and I'm going to be talking about the 6 roles briefly in today's session. And most recently, the Host Leadership Field Book, which is our new book of 30 different chapters from around the world, different people's experience of using these ideas in different settings. So the first message of host leadership is this. Are you going to step forward or step back next? Are you going to step forward or step back next? Because hosting and host leadership is a dance. It's a dance of stepping forward to do something, to say something, to make something happen, to start something off, and then to step back and allow others to step forward into the space you've created and into the setting that you've created. And there was already a question about when do I do this? Well, that's something you learn with practice. But there's a good guide. If you step back and everyone looks around cluelessly, then you've probably stepped back too soon. But if you don't step back enough, then it becomes all about you, and people get very comfortable standing around on the sidelines and letting you do all the work and take all the strain. And that's not what we want either. So this is a dance that we probably all do at some level, but we can learn to do it better, and we can learn to be more aware about what happens when we step forward and step back. So just a little outline of what we're going to talk about. I'm going to connect up today's session with last week's session from Mary Ulbean, and I thought she said some excellent stuff. And a couple of things I want to flag up particularly as a basis for today. We're going to look at 3 different leadership relationships: the hero, the servant, and the host. We're going to look at the host-guest relationship, which is the one I'm encouraging you to explore, and the 6 roles of a host leader from the book, which will lead us into breakout conversations about applying these ideas in your real life settings. So as you listen to the session now, do bear that in mind. Start to notice things that you think, oh, that could be useful, that could be interesting, that's a novel idea, so that's something I haven't thought about, or even that's something I do already. I wonder how I can do more of that and do it better. So thinking back to, I watched Muriel Bean's talk from last week, and I was very, very impressed with it. I thought she packed a lot in, and a lot of complex stuff in quite accessible terms. Two things I want to flag up that I thought were particularly interesting. The first was this zone of enabling leadership. And you remember she had her 3 bits of leadership. There was the entrepreneurial one, the enabling one, and then the implementing one. And the enabling leadership was this zone where things are coming together, and the enabler, as the leader, helps them to form. And this is her slide that's on the screen. Individuals, often in positions of formal authority, who enable and protect adaptive space. And she showed this slide with the blue bit on the right there, with the arrow with all the squiggles and ins and outs and roundabouts. And that's absolutely my experience of what host leadership is about. It is about holding this space of enablement that encourages people to come forward, to contribute, to get involved. And Mary commented that this isn't taught in leadership development, and she's right up to a point. It's not, but that's what I've been trying to do, and I'm doing, and there are other people doing it as well. So this idea of being an enabling leader is a strong carryover from last week's session, as is this idea of an emergence mindset. Mary talked about the idea of knowing how to link stuff up, knowing how to fuel emergence, play the pressures, which means that there are times when things will be very promising, and there are times when they probably won't fit very much, and some things go better than others. And it's about juggling this. What are we going to encourage? What are we going to kind of park for now? What may be fading away? What may be coming up? And this idea of things will emerge that you hadn't thought of, and that's probably good. And one of the things, the differences between a kind of conventional hero type leader and a host enabling emergence leader, is that heroes hate the appearance of new ideas that they didn't think of. Whereas host leaders love the appearance of useful things that they didn't think of, because together we can all achieve more, and that way new things can come. So if we start to think then about what is leadership about, and many people are drawing the distinction now between leadership and leading. And leadership is a kind of noun, a bit boring, but leading is a verb, to lead. And leading is, of course, a relationship, not a role. Gregory Bateson, one of my great heroes, once said that a role is a half-assed relationship. A relationship needs 2 people, one on each end, to mean anything, at least one on each end. So let's think about leading as a relationship, and the kind of relationships we want to develop and build. And this slide is going to show 3 kinds of leadership relationships. And we're just going to examine them all briefly to see what is the metaphor and what is the implied relationship. So here's the first one, the leader as a hero. Now this is a very, very ancient idea, and it's not going away anytime soon, I'm afraid. The idea of the leader as hero, as old as humanity itself probably, the leader is the one at the top of the pyramid, the one who's the strongest, the one who knows more, the one who's cleverer, the one who issues the orders, the one who makes the decisions, and the one who everyone looks to. And of course, people love a hero because they can put their trust in them. And we've seen, unfortunately, sad ramifications of that on the other side of the pond recently, what happens when people put their trust in a flawed hero. But this kind of leadership model was effective and can be effective where information needs to flow up and instructions need to flow down, and you need clear accountability. And that tends to mean crisis situations and that sort of thing. But it's not a very good model for an ongoing, developing, emerging organization. And if we look at who are the others, if the leader is the hero, who are the others? And what the hero does is they turn up when needed and they save the day. That's the classical role of a hero. And whether that is Batman or Superman or the Duke of Wellington or Winston Churchill or whichever hero you like, they turn up and they save the day at the right moment. But that unfortunately means that the other people are cast into the role of being the rescued people. They're the ones who the hero saves. And their job is to do what the hero tells them gratefully and not ask too many difficult questions. And that is not, I think, a good model for sustaining a developing and growing organization. So in the 1970s emerged another deliberately counter-blasting view of leadership, and that was the leader as servant, the work of Robert Greenleaf and others. And it's a brilliant counterblast. And you see here now that the pyramid is turned upside down, and the leader as the servant supports the organization, and they serve the organization, they steward the organization. And that's a terrific, different view. And I wish it was more popular, but it's not that popular. And there are some reasons for that, I think. One of them is that nobody really either is a servant or has servants anymore. I don't know if anyone on this call has a servant. I certainly don't, not in the classical old style sense. And actually, we don't really understand the metaphor of servant. It's very rich and it's very well worth exploring, but it's not part of our everyday life anymore, as it perhaps would have been in the days of Downton Abbey and Bridgerton and all those people. Another difficulty is that the relationship it appears to offer is a curious one, because of course if one half of the relationship is a servant, then the other half is the master. That's the counterpart of a servant. And people worry about where's the accountability if the leader is simply serving the organization. Who's in charge actually? Now, of course, there are answers to that, and Greenleaf intended us to grapple with this as a kind of paradox. But many people can't be bothered to grapple with a paradox. They want something to do. So I think that servant leadership is a brilliant idea, but what we want to do now is build on it with this third relationship, which is the leader as a host. And you'll see now the image is no longer a triangle, whether that way up or that way up. The image now is a circle. And the host is one of the circle, but also they're slightly different. And you see that the figure at 12 o'clock has a slightly different colored top. And that means they're the host. So you're one of the group and slightly different to the group all at the same time, which is a very, very interesting position to be in. And if the leader is a host, of course, then the others are the guests. And this idea of a host-guest relationship is a very intriguing one, because the host is both responsible for their guests and serves them. So it's kind of above and below all at once, which is a strange and puzzling thing until you realize that we all actually do it anyway. We've all been hosts. We haven't, many of us, been servants, but we've all been hosts. We've all invited people to a party. We've all invited people around to dinner. And so we understand it at one level already, this idea of being a host, and we can tap into that. And the good news is that with the work that I've done, and that's the work that I'm bringing in this webinar, we can expand our ability to do that from wherever starting point we are. So if this starts to be, oh, I know a bit about this already, that's probably right, because you've been a host and you've been a guest, and you probably understand the difference between good hosting and bad hosting at a kind of instinctive level already. But you probably haven't explored it and thought about it in the kind of level of detail that we're going to do today. So there's a dictionary definition of a host: someone who receives and entertains guests. And so you can't be a host without guests. But of course, we're not actually inviting people to a party, but we're thinking in those terms as the leader of might be our team, might be our project, it might be our ward, it might be our hospital, it might be our unit, it might be simply the people we're working with, it might be our patients, it might be the care home structures that we're working with. So anyone can think of themselves as a host. You don't have to be a formal host. You put your host hat on and view the other people as your guests, and that's where it all begins. And the host is both the first and the last. This is the proverb that I first met the idea of hosting in, an old Arabic proverb. The host is both the first and the last. And I thought immediately, well, that's the leader, isn't it? You know, the leader is the first and the last. And this image of the ship's captain being last off the sinking ship came immediately to my mind, because we all know that the captain is responsible for the safety of the crew and the passengers, and therefore if the ship is in difficulty, the captain has to be the last person off, having taken responsibility. And if any of you get the chance to watch the film Miracle on the Hudson, with Tom Hanks playing the airline captain, Sully, who lands his airplane on the Hudson River in New York, there's a very striking scene there where he's going around checking under the seats to make sure everybody is out as the plane is sinking. And he's very much the last person off and very reluctant to leave. But it's a grand example of this idea of, yes, you're first because you have to welcome people and get them in. And then if something goes wrong, you're last because you also have to look after them. So that was where it started for me. The host is both the first and the last. And this is a very ancient art, hosting. It's fundamental to human society, in fact. And it's still a very strong part of the natural culture of things in places where the going is very tough, like the desert, steppes, the tundra, the plains, because those are places where if you do not connect and welcome and support your fellow travelers as you meet them, they may well die. So hospitality emerged very, very early on in history as a kind of key survival function. And if you go to the deserts, like I did, and talk to the Bedouin in, for example, Egypt, you find that there's very, very strong, this hosting culture still today, treating everybody as a valued guest. And this picture was taken a few years ago in Egypt. And these are the only thing that will tell you, these are Bedouin, modern Bedouins. And the only thing that tells you this picture is taken in the 21st century is the plastic jerry can on the ground there. Everything else could have been 2,000 years ago easily. And that culture survives. You can't, of course, see the Toyota Land Cruiser that's just off to the right. That will give you more of a clue. And the word host comes from this ancient Indo-European word hosti, which it means both host and guest. So it's already, host is a word for a relationship, the host and guest relationship. Can't have one without the other. So as I was researching this idea of what does it mean to be a good host, I came across this interesting story from Queen Victoria, in fact. Queen Victoria, of course, monarch of the United Kingdom from 1837 to 1901. And two of the key figures during her reign as Prime Minister were William Gladstone, who you see on the left, and Benjamin Disraeli, who you see on the right. And they kind of took turns at being Prime Minister for quite a long time through Victoria's reign. And she met them and had dinner with them both many times. And Queen Victoria, in her own diary, wrote this observation: when I have dinner with Gladstone, I come away with the idea that he is the most clever, witty and sophisticated person in the country. But when I have dinner with Disraeli, I come away with the idea that I am the most clever, witty and sophisticated person in the country. And I think that shows us that Disraeli is the better host, because hosts want to appreciate their guests and give them space and make them feel good and make them feel capable and skilled, rather than trying to show off how capable and skilled we are, which is the hero response, which was more like what Gladstone. She was the Queen of Ireland and Britain, somebody says. Yes, that's probably right. Maybe the United Kingdom didn't exist then. I should know that living in Scotland, shouldn't I? Thank you. So, starting with this metaphor of a host, the host leadership idea works as a metaphor and a model. And as I said, we already know about hosting because we do it. We may not have thought about it very carefully, but we all do it and we all have experience of it. But what happens when you dig in and you really start to work out, well, what do really good hosts do that makes them good hosts, and how can we learn about that? And I spent a decade and more working with Helen Bailey, my co-author, who's at the top right of this picture with me. And we went around and interviewed loads of people. Some of them we thought were leaders who were very good hosts, like, for example, the Everest Mountaineer, Sir Chris Bollington, and other people who were hosts who we thought were good leaders. And that included people like hotelier Harry Murray, for example, people who run hotels and restaurants, who really understand the depth of what this needs to be. And some of them were very contemporary people, like Pam Warhurst from Incredible Edible Todmorden, and Chris Anderson from TED, and others of them were historical figures like Peggy Guggenheim, the arts patron, and Ronnie Scott, the jazz saxophonist. And they all had qualities of a host about them. And we did, somebody's putting in the chat, hosting is also hospitality. Yes, that's right. Hospitality comes from the same root linguistically as host. So hosting is hospitality. But also from the same root is, of course, hospital. And so this is because back in the Middle Ages, when hospitals were being invented, they were largely run by monks and nuns and other people like that, whose job it was to make people comfortable. And there wasn't all that much medicine they could do in modern terms, but they could at least make people comfortable and care for them. And so the idea of hospitals are places where you were hospitable in the old days, you know, in the medieval times. And maybe that's an idea that we can reconnect with or connect with in some other way. Hospitals might be more hospitable sometimes, perhaps. So out of this research and all this stuff that Helen and I created, we thought, how can we put this together? And we came up with these 6 roles of engagement, as we call them. It's a play on the term rules of engagement, which is a military thing, which are things you have to do. Roles of engagement are 6 things that hosts can do that build that relationship, host-guest relationship, that enables your guests to be comfortable, to contribute, to join in, and to produce something amazing and new and interesting. And so here they are briefly, and I'll say them briefly, and then I'll go into a little more detail. So there's the initiator role. It's about finding priorities and starting things off. There's the inviter role, which is about inviting and engaging people, reaching out to people with an outstretched hand of welcome. There's the space creator role, which is about creating the space where the interactions are going to happen. And that might be a physical space, might be an online space, all sorts of things. But thinking about the space, how does the space support what we want to do? The gatekeeper role is about negotiating boundaries. What happens inside the boundary? What happens outside the boundary? What are the house rules inside the boundary? How do we understand that? How do we welcome people in? Then the connector role, introducing people to each other. It's a key thing for hosts. How do we connect our guests to each other, not just to us? And finally, the co-participator role. You're both the leader and you're one of the group. And that produces its own interesting set of tensions and creative ideas. So, and these roles are different ways to step forward when they're needed. You can't do them all the time, and you shouldn't do them all the time. What we suggest to people is, which role do I need to step forward in next? is a good way of starting to think about these things. And you find that, you know, as things progress and projects emerge and initiatives come and go, different ones of these things are needed at different times. Sometimes all of them in the same day, maybe, but it's a good way to think about them as how can I step forward next in which role? So that's what we're going to do. And Natalie's saying, I feel much better about thinking of myself as the space creator than the person who sets up all the meetings. Absolutely. It's really crucial, and you can make a big difference the way you set up those meetings and you organize the spaces and you connect with people. It's absolutely fundamental to how they show up on the day. And with good advanced communication, a nice space, a prepared space, people welcoming, a lot of your problems start to disappear because people relax and they know what they're there for. So great point, Natalie, thank you. So the initiator role is about finding and setting priorities, picking what are we going to focus on next. But there's a step before that, actually, which is listening for what's being called for. And that is about sort of saying, where are the needs? What are the forthcoming challenges? What do we need to tackle? How do we need to evolve? And it's a key role of a host to think about, well, what's the next thing we're going to look at? And then when you decide that, you set the priorities, and then you get things moving with small steps. And this is surprisingly powerful idea, getting things moving with small steps. And I've dug around for all sorts of things. Great initiatives in the world have started with somebody having an idea, and rather than just sit on it and sweat on it, they've tried the idea out on a few people. And the few people are enthusiastic and they get encouraged to carry on. And so engaging with people, starting with small steps, is really the way to test ideas and see what is the way we can proceed with this. And if everyone else is telling you, no, that's not very important, there's two options. One is you're incredibly far-sighted and can see further than anybody else, or you may have got the wrong end of the stick. And both of those are possible, of course. So as an initiator, we're looking around for what needs focusing on next. We're starting to engage people in that, and we're getting things moving with small steps. The the inviter role is about, well, often it's the next thing that happens. It's about who do we want to engage with? Who do we want to invite to get involved? And inviting is very different to instructing. And when we invite people, we want to reach out to them with a welcoming hand. And we say, this is going to be a really amazing, attractive thing that we're setting up here. And we want you to be involved with it because, fill in the gap, you have this experience, you have this knowledge, you are connected to these other people. Why do we want you there? And when you reach out in a way that is attractive and acknowledging, people really start to pay attention. Rather than just sort of sending out instructions to you, please come to this, come to this meeting in meeting room 6 on this date. Start to engage people, reach out to them with that welcoming hand, and use the soft power of invitation. Soft power is a term that comes from the diplomatic world originally, but it's about how can I get you to want to do what I want you to do, rather than have to tell you to do what you don't want to do. And it's underplayed sometimes, particularly when we're working with influence and we're not working with position or power. The soft power of invitation becomes a really key tool and possibility, particularly as we want to look at people from who are on the fringes of things. And one of the key things as a host is we want to reach out perhaps a bit further than we might normally to engage people who are on the edges of things that might be good to have them a bit closer to the center. And they may not come if we don't actually reach out and engage them and bring them in. So this is a key thing that we're going to ask you in the breakout rooms. One of the things is think about particularly who are these people on the fringes that you might want to start thinking about reaching out to. The space creator role. The space creator role. This is not in most leadership books, but I think it's really important. When you're going to bring people together to do some interesting emergence and enabling, what's the space? And that can work on the level of the physical space, or the interactional or psychological space. How safe does it feel? What does it feel like to be there? And of course, and also headspace for yourself. Give yourself some space to reflect on things. The physical space is really interesting. If I get invited in to speak and it's a boardroom setting with a big table that takes up all the space in the room, my heart sinks, because very, very inflexible space, often set up with power in mind, the chairman at the head of the table and the junior people at the other end. Whereas if we get into a space which has got flexible furniture, we can move it around, we can have small groups, we can have people standing up and moving around, talking to each other. You can do much more with spaces like that. So thinking about even on the level of how are the chairs laid out, there's a great number of possibilities to be thought about, and how you set the chairs and the table out and how you move them around as things go on will have a great factor on what actually happens. This is setting this space up for enabling an emergence. So just don't underestimate the power of the physical space. But then there's also the psychological and interactional space. When you come in, how does it feel? Are you welcome? Are you expected? Is stuff there for you? Are you encouraged to join in? Are you introduced to other people? These all make big differences. Then we have the gatekeeper role. It's about negotiating boundaries, and I call it containers. I've written a book about hosting organizational change, and it's about creating these containers where people can work together. A container is a combination of a topic, people, and place, and it might be a meeting, it might be a project, whatever. But thinking about the balance between how big is the topic, how big is the group, how long is the thing, determines a great deal about how you want to bring people together. But whatever, you want to welcome people over the threshold into your space. So you think about your meeting or your project as like your space. When people come into it, you want to greet them at the door. That's what we do when we invite people to our house. We greet them at the door and we invite them in and we explain how things work here and where the loos are and you know, where you can put your coat, and this is the dog, introduce you to the dog who's come snuffling along. That's the domestic equivalent. But you want to talk to people as they come in and welcome them over the threshold, and you can teach them the house and routines and rules and how we do things. And as a host, looking after the way we do things here is a really crucial piece of your role. Yeah, it's best if the group agrees and implements the gatekeeper role. I'm not sure, maybe, but someone has to start that off, Kevin. And I think that's the host job, is to start that off, and you may want to, of course, share any of these roles and engage people in helping and supporting and doing any of these other roles yourself. But I think there are choices around there. And just as there are choices in that, there's also the choice to say no sometimes. If a disruptive guest comes to a party, the host can ultimately throw them out. And that's the host's choice. It can only be the host's choice. So sometimes, if things are being disruptive and it's not useful, the host has to step in as the gatekeeper and intervene there. Doesn't happen very often, but it's always got to be a possibility. Just two more to go. The connector role. When I ask people what do hosts do, introduce people to each other is often very near the top of the list. And this is a really interesting one. We want to connect people with, we want to connect with people. So I, as the host, want to connect with all the guests, of course. But then I want to connect them with each other as well. And hero leaders they love to connect with people directly, but they like to route everything through themselves. So it's all about me, and I want to stop these two people connecting, because if they connect, then they can talk about things behind my back and I won't be involved and I won't know what's going on. Now, that's the hero route. The host route is, no, I must connect these people because they have interesting things to talk about and they can get on with things without me worrying about them. And so it's about giving away that power as you connect people up together. Very, very strong role. So look to make new connections and then let them get on with it. And the last one is the co-participator role. We provide for everyone. When you invite someone around for a meal, you give them, you serve them the meal, but then you eat the same meal too. So you serve the others first, but then you join in and eat the same food, and you're following the same house rules. You're part of the same group. You're following your own norms and desired ways of doing things. And we've seen, of course, in the pandemic here, how disastrous it can be if somebody doesn't follow the rules and then gets away with it, and how much that can undermine the feelings of being together, being part of the same group. So being both the first and the last. So leaders eat last, as Simon Sinek says in his excellent book of that topic. So these are our 6 roles of engagement. My time is just about up for now, and I'm going to pass us back to Catherine to set up the breakout groups. I think that's...
Thank you, Mark. That was brilliant, and some great comments in the chat. People really engaged with all of these ideas already. So Rosie's going to, Molly is going to share some questions that you and I have devised, Mark, for people to consider in breakout rooms. So we're just about to set you up into those smaller discussion groups. Now, you may or may not have a facilitator in your group. Don't wait for a facilitator. Just start introducing yourselves to each other and get on with interacting with the questions. If you have got a facilitator there, then that's even better. More the merrier in your little parties that you'll be hosting between you. So the questions are just about to come up. So in leading change towards personalised care, when might you need to do more stepping back or stepping forward? Okay, and the second question, how can you invite and connect people from the fringes towards the centre? And the third question, how can you create better spaces for engagement and emergence, either physical or online? And Mark, there was a few questions already in the chat about how we can translate this to online. So I was thinking, yeah, you know, kind of like everyone's thinking the right space. This is kind of a new world, a new way of doing things sometimes online. So we're actually giving you that question to consider as well. So fantastic material you've had from Mark. Do enjoy the discussions you'll have in breakout rooms. There's a few people saying apologies, you've got to go. As we said, the learning will be in your discussion, your reflection on it. So those of you who stay will get even more chance to kind of thinking about how you implement this. So without further ado, then I think Rosie's going to send people into breakout rooms. So wait for your invitation, do join, and we'll see you back here in half an hour. Rosie?
Yes, we're all back.
That's brilliant. Okay, so it would be really great to hear from you about you know, some of the discussions that you've had. So if you could sort of start to just put some reflections in the chat, that would be great. And then I'm going to I'm going to bring Mark in, and we can perhaps have a look in the chat, and also the chat monitors can help us draw out themes. And so we can have a bit of a conversation about some of those, any themes or questions maybe that came up for Mark. We've got about 10 minutes for that. So let's see what you thought. So it doesn't have to be in any order. You know, just put your reflections on your conversation, what you've heard this morning about host leadership into the chat.
And any questions?
And any questions? Thank you, Mark. Yeah. Julie, what's coming through from what you can see at the moment, and maybe we can get Mark to pick up on some of those things.
How about Lindsay?
Sorry, Julie dipped off. Yeah, Lindsay, can you tell us what's coming out from the chat? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. It's coming through as a strong theme. It was also discussed in my group, but how stepping back is sometimes it's harder to do. You feel like you've got more confidence to go forward, but to take that step back requires bit of a deeper understanding and to have confidence to say, okay, I'm doing this now. Another that's coming through at the moment is just saying that it's okay for others to take the space again. So when you feel that you have to step, when you feel you have that need to step forward, it's letting others come in. And just that how there is positives in working virtually at the moment. Just a couple of hints and tips. Music seems to be coming through. Yeah, and just taking time to reflect, and understanding what your role is in this.
I just saw somebody put stop the bus. And I like that, because it's sometimes that you just do need a breather, don't you? And it's so very, very difficult right now that people aren't necessarily getting that time. But if you're being really honest, how often do you build in time every week, every month, under normal circumstances, to stop the bus? So that is an act of leadership in itself, in creating that space for to allow those quieter voices to come through. So people are being really honest. Linda's put never. Somebody once said to me, no one's ever going to tell you to block time out in your diary for thinking, but it's the most radical act you might make as a leader. Mark, any reflections on what you're seeing in the chat or from what Lindsay was saying?
I did several comments on stepping back and how that can be a bit scary, and agreed. But if you step back and nothing happens, you can step forward again. It's not a, this is almost a minute by minute thing in my thinking, and it's a good sign. If you step back and you step back and you wait, and somebody will sort of come forward, step forward, say something, right? And there's a little tension. How long are you prepared to wait in that moment? And it's good to practice waiting. But if people really are not stepping forward, you can step forward again. So the dance continues. And another thought I had looking at the things about encouraging people to step forward, take control, contribute. Yes, absolutely. And I personally have policy. Once I've stepped back, if things are going fine, I don't step forward again. If things are emerging in a nice way, I want to kind of just stay one of the group and nod and applaud and see what happens, rather than be too keen to kind of jump back in. And I jump back in when we need to reorient something else, or we need to move on, or whatever. So, but this is something you just develop, and using the metaphor of a host, the understanding we already have in our bodies and our minds, if you like, of being a host in a party, and bring that into your meetings and your projects and so on, and your engagements with your clients and your service users and everything else. That's the first step, is bring that stuff that you already have into play. And then once you get more experience with it, you can expand it and build on it.
Thank you. I mean, there's quite a few stuff coming through, isn't there, about in order to be included, you need to be invited, and actually remembering that inviter role is a really powerful one. And you can actually I think you can misuse the gatekeeper one by not inviting everybody. So there's something about inclusion here, and how we achieve equity in the voices that we hear. So do more.
And there are times not to invite people as well. And this is one of those great, there's no right answer to it. But if it's a, it's a brave person who takes a very controversial step in a big group when you haven't sort of laid the ground. I live in Edinburgh, and we love the film Sunshine on Leith. I don't know, some of you may have seen Sunshine on Leith. There's a scene in Sunshine on Leith where a young man proposes to his girlfriend in the midst of a wedding reception for somebody else, and she turns him down, and it's the most dreadful moment. I can scarcely watch it. It's so horrible. Some things are best done in small groups or quietly on the side rather than in front of everybody. So think about that when you're thinking about how big a group and who do we need to invite to this particular bit.
Yes, absolutely. That was great. And there's something about the power of small. You're talking about small steps to start, and it's a theme that's been running through our program. So talking to a few people and changing one small thing, if you can get that ripple effect to happen elsewhere by your socializing an idea, or you're bringing more people on board. It means you don't have to do it all yourself, and it means those steps aren't scary and maybe don't take so much of your time. And if it's the wrong step, you haven't wasted too much time. Exactly.
If it turns out to be a misstep, well, nothing. It's a small one. Nothing much is wasted, and you can easily go and do it. If you make a big misstep, that's time and energy and stuff you don't need to be spending.
Any other questions for Mark? So do make sure you put questions in the chat now. So we've built in some time for that this time. Or any other sort of final reflections. I'll come to Maggie and see if there's anything else that sort of we haven't sort of covered in this little wrap-up part of the session.
Thank you. There was a question there, and I'm trying to find it as I'm scrolling back up, about sometimes what is the advice for a host faced with a hero leader, Mark? I mean,
that's a lovely question.
It's a great question.
Really good question. So my advice is two things. First of all, be a good guest of the hero leader. So one of the things about good hosts is we also have to be good guests. That means being supportive, offering to do things, offering to help, acting like a good guest. And the other thing is start thinking about yourself as a host when you can. So when you're running your bits of things, you can do it in a host way. And when you're inviting, maybe you get the chance to invite the hero into something that you're hosting, then perhaps they'll notice and see how effective it is. But it's, I think being the good guest, people appreciate supporters, even heroes, and being the person who will muck in and support rather than sit on the edges and complain about how hopeless it all is.
I loved your body language there, Mark. We've all met that. And any tips really on this host leadership in a virtual space? Because that's anything different we should be doing.
Well, I think I was saying to Catherine, I think she's done it today very well. I really enjoyed the way she brought everyone in, and then we had some music, and it's clear something was happening, and we'd all been communicated with beforehand. I think there's a thing about communicating beforehand, so people know what they're coming. There's important thing about welcoming people over the metaphorical threshold. So when they arrive, I want to be in the room first, and I want to say, "Oh, hello, Lucy. Oh, hello, Simon. Welcome," and engaging with people as they show up in an online space, and being the first and being the last it gives you a chance to meet people, to talk informally, to make sure everything's working, help people who are struggling with the tech. That's your responsibility, I think, as a host. And so get there a bit early, be prepared to stay a bit late, have a little chat with people, if they want to talk with you about other things, in the same way as we would in a meeting room. You grab a word with someone after the meeting. You can do that, and making sure that people have a strong idea. What are we coming to? What's it for today? How long is it going to be? Maybe it'll be over quicker. Hurrah. So that's another thing. 1 hour meetings don't have to last an hour, people. Sometimes it's all been done in 20 minutes, and I'd encourage you to exercise that judgment too.
Yeah, and so what I've heard, Mark, actually, there are some advantages to working in this virtual space as a host leader, because you can meet more people, and hopefully you can embrace more people in this virtual world that you might not be able to do in a room as an individual. Well,
and we can invite people from all over the world, assuming they've got an internet connection. And there's amazing things about that. I'm in other projects I'm running at the moment. We're having a series of calls with people in Uruguay and the United States and in Sri Lanka and other places like that. And it's just so easy in this format. There are other disadvantages, but we can reach out to so many more people. That's amazing.
And somebody was saying about, obviously, digital inclusion is an issue, but I suppose my counter point to that is that lots of people can't afford to come to physical meetings. So there's always been a barrier, and when, kind of in the work that I've been doing over the last 20 years with organisations, we talk about people who do not attend an appointment, or we held a meeting and no one came. And a lot of those are actually barriers to access, in a way that the virtual world enables us, even going forward, to keep hold of these things, because it actually, whilst digital inclusion might be an issue for some, and you might have to do something about that to help somebody kind of be included in a different way, it actually can be more inclusive, as long as you're aware of and willing to make reasonable adjustments. That's brilliant. Thank you so much for all of the discussion. We really, really appreciate it. We know how busy everybody is. I just want to say a big thank you to Mark for joining us today. That's been absolutely brilliant finish to our module 2 on leading in complexity. So in the chat then, if you could just put one thing that you're taking away from today, and that will be a way of us checking out with you. And also Rosie's put a link in there to a very short evaluation. It's really important to us that you tell us how it went today, what you're getting out of these things, so that we can tailor them around you. We've got the ability to do that, to respond to what you need as leaders and as learners. So if you could let us know what you're taking away, and if you have a look in the chat, you'll be able to see that your collective here, your group of people, your group of committed leaders, all kind of moving together, each with their own steps, but actually joined up together. That's actually big changes, and big changes either in mindset or things that you might do as a result of it. Lots of great things coming through there. Thank you so much.
I particularly like the person who just said, I host a great party, so I'll bring that to play. Absolutely, folks. That's it. That's the first step.
Brilliant. More parties. I think it's Mark, did you say, why would you hold a meeting if you can have a party?
Yes. That's
my mantra
great way of thinking about it. Yes.
That's my mantra. And with that, it's a wonderful segue into, I'll say, off you go, maestro, hit the music. We'll say goodbye to you, and we will see you hopefully on the 25th of February for our next masterclass. We'll follow up with an email to you with all of the links to our resources, this recording. And just one last thank you to Mark and for everybody else who helped out today. Have a great day.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.